Hi guys, Jonx Simulations from the Flight Simulator Freelance Society, and today we are going to bring you episode 2 of the Microsoft Flight Simulator Development Series. And if you don't know what this is a series that is diving deep into how you create your own aircraft for Microsoft Flight Simulator, okay? I'm not hiding behind any closed doors, I'm not hiding behind the brick wall. I'm coming out here and I'm teaching you guys how to do this straight, okay? And sure, it's not going to be the most expert development series out there, but it's going to be probably one of the only ones out there. So I'm glad I'm out here teaching you guys some things. And before we jump into it, as you can see in the background here, this is a Discus 2C glider, specifically the Got Friends Discus 2C glider. And if you don't know what that is, it is a special project we've been putting in our back pocket here for the last quite a bit, actually quite a while. And the Got Friends team, myself, 270 Inc., Got Gravel, and Microde have been working overtime to bring this to you guys. And yes, we are. We're bringing this to you here this holiday season, soon around the corner. And it's going to be freeware and available on flightsim.to. And I'm really excited about this project. This is a follow-up to my Discus 2B, which it's kind of weird that I released that to the public after looking at the quality of this one, but once again, that was my very first aircraft, and I'm glad that it got such a reception that it did because it put me into the position I am today. But this glider is going to be the real new deal, and I honestly think it's the best glider in the game currently, even though it hasn't technically hit you guys yet. As far as test playing it, man, it is great. So keep an eye on that. Once again, that's going to be freeware on flightsim.to, and that's dropping here soon this holiday season. I can't drop the exact date because we're still in beta phase, but it should be soon, and you guys should be able to fly that. So enough of that ad. I'm glad you guys are here. Today in episode 2, we're going to be covering the Blender to Microsoft Flight Simulator process, and we're going to be talking about the actual Blender to Microsoft Flight Simulator add-on. But more importantly, we're going to be talking about the specific steps you need to take to get your 3D model from Blender to Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay? So what does that entail? That entails the 3 phases of Microsoft Flight Simulator export. We're going to be talking about what you have to do inside Blender, what you have to do project checks before you even open up the game, and these don't have to be mandatory every time. Most of these are just your one-time first check before you do it the first time. But a couple of these are actually really good to follow every single time. So we'll be talking about that as well. And then lastly, we're going to talk about what you have to do inside Microsoft Flight Simulator to actually import it into the game and look at it on the flight line. Okay? So let's get into the first bulletin here, that is import your 3D model. Okay? So in this case, we were using this aircraft propeller, which, like I said, was from Hamu Hamad, and it was $2 royalty free. Like I said here, great price. So if you haven't picked that up that was mentioned in episode 1, go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and download a few things. So we're going to download specifically that aircraft propeller native.blend because we're working in Blender. And you could also have the option of downloading all motions, which I'm sure has like some aileron movement and stuff. Like I said, I'm not teaching you. I want to teach you guys that from scratch. So I'm just going to download this one without all the fancy animations. And then while that's downloading, let's go ahead and download the textures.rar. And I think I've already downloaded these ahead of time. I have right here just to save some time on the live stream. And let's go ahead and while this is downloading, let's talk about Blender setup, okay? So let's open up Blender here. Whoa. That was me checking it out earlier to make sure it was a working aircraft. So some things in Blender. The first thing you want to do is if you're importing a new project, go ahead and delete these 4 things over here. The collection, camera, cube, and light. You're not going to need those. You can actually keep the collection and just name the first one to just Aircraft Master or something. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about collections here in a bit. But let's say you're not using this project, which is already in a blend file, and you're actually importing an aircraft into the game. All you got to do, into Blender, all you got to do is go to Import, And there's a bunch of them. There's DAEs, AVCs, FBX, which is probably the biggest one. There's GLTFs, and there's OBJs. And so if anyone's ever bought an aircraft or bought a 3D model online, you'll know that you'll get a lot of them in these formats. For example, I can go to like a STL, which I know I own something of, go to my downloads, go to my 3D assets, and I have this German World War I fighter. And if I click import here, you're going to see it pop up here in a second. And that's just basically how you import anything into Blender. You go to File, you go to Import, and you bring it in. And then we're going to talk about the specific process of what you do once your aircraft is in the game. I'm sorry, I keep saying in the game, in Blender. And here it is. Obviously, it's humongous, okay? So it needs tons of scaling issues, and we're not going to be talking about that in this one. Actually, yeah, this is probably good stuff to cover. Okay, so let's imagine this is the aircraft we're going to be working with. Obviously, it's humongous, okay? So we're going to be talking about scaling. Now, if you look here at this grid, as I zoom in, the grid keeps getting more squares and more squares and more squares, okay? So the point where the squares stop, so as I zoom in here, squares go, the point where I stop, each one of these squares is 1 meter, okay? And so this will help you when you're scaling down aircraft. And obviously when you got an aircraft that you've bought online and it's probably a real world aircraft, you're going to want to scale it completely accurate, okay? And in this case, I'm just going to show you the quick and dirty. So we're going to click on our aircraft here, open this little side tab, and we're going to change the scale down probably all the way to 0.025 on everything, because it is, once again, massive. Next, what we're going to want to do is position it correctly. So as you can see here, let me get my zoom working a little better. As you can see here, we have our cursor already selected on world origin. And how do I know that? There's a little white-red circle with a cross through it. And if you don't know how to get there, hit Shift S, and you can always move your cursor to world origin there, and your cursor will move to the world origin. So what you want to do here next is we're going to want to right-click on our aircraft, set the origin to the center of the volume. So now our origin's where this little dot is, and we can hold Shift S, and we can move the selection to the cursor. So now our aircraft is actually centered in Blender, okay? And now what you're going to want to do is imagine this as a floor. So if we go to a side view by hitting one of these ortho views up here, so it's hit X, you can see that, imagine the green line is the floor. Well, the aircraft's not lined up, so we probably need to be rotating this aircraft about 90 degrees on the X-axis, and now it's kind of lined up. Now, where do you position it? Okay, so you have to position it, first of all, if we click on the top-down view, or Z, we need to position it Y negative. So as you can see here, you got the solid line to the X, that's a positive. Solid line to a Y, that's Y positive. The ones out here that don't have lines, that's X negative and Y negative. So your nose of the aircraft has to be facing down the Y negative, okay? So when you go into top-down view, or just like that, your aircraft has to be facing down. So in this case, it's already facing down after that rotation correction. Sometimes you won't have that. Sometimes you'll have it sitting, more like this, and you need to figure it out to get it lined up right, okay? So just make sure that on the side view, it's lined up with the floor, and then on the top view, you got nose down on the Y negative. After that, you're going to want to position your world center correctly, okay? So there's a little article on this in the SDK documentation. You'll find it under 3D model if you just search 3D model and then go into the aircraft models. There is a file setup, and it's talking about, like I said, that each setup should be 1 unit equals 1 meter, and that's what it's talking about here, is each square equals 1 meter. And so, like I said, I did it pretty quick and dirty here, but in real life what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get the exact measure requirements. If your plane's not already modeled to scale, hopefully you've got one that's already modeled to scale, or you're starting this project from scratch and you're modeling it to scale. But if it's not, the best way to do it is just go into these ortho views, and you can go ahead and click on this measurement tool, and you could actually measure out what it is. And what you could do is you could be like, oh, it's actually 19 meters in real life or something. So you can measure out, 19, and then you could click on your plane. You could go to the scale here, and you can actually start scaling the whole thing up based on what the real measurements are, okay? So there are ways to do it. Like I said, take your time, especially if you're doing a real world aircraft. And I'm going to reiterate this a million times because even I'm to blame for this, is get your scale right the first time, get it set up so that it's fine. Then you don't have to touch scale ever again, and that your VR is working. And like I said, I have had this issue, especially on the GB, one of our latest release, where we had some scaling issues in VR. This was completely my fault, and I didn't scale it properly to begin with because it was just fresh modeling, and it was a concept aircraft, and we were working with a remote control aircraft that had nothing to do with a real world aircraft, and I just didn't scale it right. So make sure that you get your scale right to begin with so that you don't have those issues down the line, because once you start adding things to the cockpit and adding things on the exterior and just adding a bunch of animations and stuff, it's almost impossible to start changing scale around without redoing a bunch of work, okay? So get your scale right to begin with. Next one, it talks about how the plane should be positioned top view so the nose is pointing downward. We just talked about that on the Y negative. Then the plane should be positioned in the file so that its center is approximately 1/3 of the way down the wing, and that the z-axis, the center, should be approximately where the water level should be, okay? So as you can see here, we got the ground level sitting at where the water level should be, okay? And that's the best explanation that they give you in the SDK. I don't like it, but that's where they recommend throwing it. In this case, with this little biplane here, water level to me is probably at where the nose is, so I'm just going to move the whole thing up to about where the nose is there. And then I'll probably take the exact center between this wing and this wing, and so direct center will be probably about like right here, so I'll just move that up to about right there, okay? And like I said, that's quick and dirty. You're kind of going to figure it out as you go, but move it to water level. The easiest way to think about it as the nose of the aircraft usually is cut directly to where it needs to be. So I normally place the aircraft nose at that direct center, and that's kind of where I play with it. And usually by then my wings on most aircraft are almost direct center or down below. It really depends on how you want to position your aircraft, but it doesn't matter too much because this is the stuff you're going to start doing inside the aircraft editor in the SDK, which we'll talk about here later in the episode. So we'll leave it there, and then the last thing I want to talk to you about on this one specifically, and I'm kind of glad we brought this model up just for this while that other one was downloading, is it's a tail dragger, okay? So a lot of you will think that maybe it needs to sit on the ground like this, where both the wheels are sitting at the same level. The answer is no. It's flying position, okay? So you obviously aren't flying at a 45-degree angle like that going straight. It will look stupid. So you need to be in a flying position, okay? And then we're going to set contact points specifically on these wheels so that in the game it naturally by gravity will drop down there, okay? So that's what you need to do there, and leave it in a flying position. Okay, so now that you understand a little bit about that, the last step, make sure that under preferences, if you search Microsoft Flight Simulator, that you have the toolkits I've talked about in the last video installed, specifically the one we're going to be using every day, which is the Microsoft Flight Simulator Toolkit, or the Microsoft Flight Simulator, or Blender to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and cancel that. I know the other one's installed by now, so let's drag that into my dev series folder that we made at the beginning of the video. And then let's go ahead and rename this to Simple Aircraft, probably. And these, this is a folder that I made. Like I said, you're going to want to have an organized source folder. So here's an example, like the discus we're working on. I leave my current versions right here at the beginning of the folder. So we have version 31 of the interior and 30 of the exterior. Then I'll have a texture folder where we have all of our textures dropping to. And then we'll have an old folder which has all the prior versions that we have. Like I said, we're on 31, so there's a bunch of prior versions in here. This is good backup in case you screw something up. And then we also have like a temporary texture folders where we drop references for things to work on. So this is just what our team does, and this is what I recommend you doing. So in this case, I'm building a Microsoft Flight Simulator Dev Series folder, and I'm going to drop that Blender that we just downloaded in here. I renamed it to Simple Aircraft because I did not like that name. And then let's go ahead and put an underscore version 1 so we can start our versioning. Okay, so as we go to 2 to 3 to 4, I created a folder in here called old, and we can start dropping the old versions in there. Okay, so we always have a backup. And then go ahead and export those textures that you downloaded from the website. And then I put them in the texture folder. Okay, so now we have our textures in the texture folder. Once you're good to go ahead and open up that aircraft. And then we kind of skim through this with the other aircraft, but import the 3D model, position, and scale. And let's hurry and get that done with this one. And the reason why I showed you with the other one is because this one was pretty much done, okay? So it opened up a render view. We don't need that. There's also a lot of other things in this Blender we don't need, like all these cameras. You can select them and you can delete those. And then specifically there's a light in here, so I think it's just the sun for render view so we can just click the sun. And something nice to know, a little tip trick in Blender, if you want to click on something and you don't want to find it in here, all you got to do is click on it, go over here, hit period on your numpad, and it will take you directly to it. And then you can delete it or do whatever you want with it. Okay? And it looks like we have a propeller that's been animated for us. I'm not going to want that animated because we're doing that from scratch. So let's click on the propeller, go find it, and right click on the animation and clear animation data, okay? Because I do not want that animated. Okay, because we're going to be teaching you guys how to animate it. So now that that is done, we've imported it. Let's look at the top-down view. And look at that, we're already Y down, Y negative, so that's good. Let's look at the side view, and look at that, we're already pretty much at the water level that I was talking about. So this is the reason I brought up the other model, because this one, out of the box, it's great. It looks like they've already lined it up and they've done the job. Even at the scale, you zoom in, it's at the scale. It looks like I said, this doesn't have a real name of this aircraft, but it looks like it's around 13 meters wide, which is pretty realistic, okay? So we'll go from there. So if you want to delete those, by the way, you can just hit delete on it and it will delete the measurements. So yeah, let's go from there. This is the reason I brought up the other model, and let's move on. Collections, okay? So this is where I'm going to be talking about collections. Now, luckily for us, if you look at the top here, this aircraft is already in a collection. It already came in a collection. Specifically, what you want to do, especially if it's not in a collection, is you want to start making your aircraft in a collection or moving your files into collections. So it's going to make exporting so much easier. What I like to do is I like to work with two collections. I'll have an interior master file, and then let's make a new collection. Oops, I made it in the wrong one. There we go. New collection in there. And I'm going to call this the exterior master file. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about these later on, but basically what you can do by having these folders is you can export certain things within the same Blender file. So you don't have to have two separate ones. Like you saw here back with my discus, we kind of already did this process, so we couldn't go back. We already got too far. We didn't want to merge it all together. But we have an exterior and an interior Blender file. In reality, it's easier to work within one Blender, okay? So we're going to be separating these into our interior and exterior inside the single Blender file. Okay, so that's what collections are for. And it's also real nice because you can turn on and off a whole collection by hitting these hide. So I can hide the whole aircraft right now because it's all in the interior master. But like, let's say I wanted to, let's find one that has like multiple components. If you click hide, it will only hide the master component. It won't hide these subcomponents, okay? So that's what's really nifty to have a collection, is you can put things in collections and you can hide the whole thing with one click. And you can also right click on it and you can select everything in that collection to move around, okay? So collections are really nice, and you can turn off the collection so that it won't even export, or you can't even modify it while you're working with it. So I recommend start using collections for everything you do, and specifically I would have an interior master, an exterior master, and this is where you could even have another collection that's called like exterior floats. You know, maybe you want to make an exterior floats version, and this just has the specific floats. So when you export it, you make sure that the floats is checked, so you're good to export the float version. So it's really nice to start making collections and start having all your submodels. If you plan on having a ski version or a float version or a 15-meter winged version compared to an 18-meter winged version, like the gliders for example, start working with collections. They're going to make your whole export job much easier. Okay, so now we talked about collections, let's talk about separating the model, okay? So this is why we built the collection, so we can start separating it where we need to go. So what I like to do here is I like to start selecting on pieces that I know are exterior and hitting H. What H does is it hides it, okay? So if I start clicking on things and hiding things that I know are exterior, I'll start hiding it. And propeller, exterior for sure. That's the empty for it. Wheels. The tail, we got some of these pieces. Okay, and then what I like to do specifically is keep my, was that interior? Yeah, it is. It's like a little seat there. What I like to do is keep my canopy and my glass on my interior, okay? So I'm just hiding things around, and if you ever need to, like you're like, oh man, now I'm confused, I can't remember what was interior, what's not, what you can do is you can hit Alt H, bring it all back, and then Control Z and hide it all again, okay? So if you're confused, just Alt H, come in here, see, like make sure this is what you want it to be, and then yeah. So you guys are starting to understand it, okay? Hide these. All right, I think I'm gonna hide that. That's a pretty good place to start, okay? And like I said, I think these two. These don't have to be perfect, okay? A lot of people think that the interior has to include only specific interior components. It doesn't. Technically, I could just have the interior be a single seat, and I could export the entire exterior as the rest of the aircraft, okay? The reason why we have an interior is because things that are clickable, when you're inside the cockpit view, you know, in Microsoft Flight Simulator, you have cockpit external and showcase or whatever. Everything that's clickable in the cockpit, buttons, yokes, switches, throttles, need to be in the interior file, okay? You can get away with it in a one file if you have your XML set up correctly. I just recommend, for ease of use, putting everything that's clickable into the interior, okay? So now that we have that all separated, what I'm actually going to do here is select everything, and we kind of did this opposite. This stuff's already in the interior, so I'm going to select everything that's hidden instead. And then you're going to want to keep an eye out. So I was hitting Control and clicking on these. You're going to want to keep an eye out for certain ones that have subsets, like this propeller, so that you can click the things down in there as well. Okay, once I have all those selected, I'm actually going to Alt H, because it won't do anything if they're hidden. So I brought them all back, but they're still all selected. And then I'm just going to go down near the bottom, and I'm going to drag them all into my exterior master. Okay? So now I got all these in my exterior master, so if I clicked hide, my exterior is now separated from my interior. And then if I went up here and I hid my interior is hidden as well. So as you can see, that's probably the quickest, dirtiest way to do it. And of course there's going to be some fine tuning depending on how you want to do it. But it looks like there's some weird door stuff going on here. Wonder if they got like a fake door. Oh yeah, there's a door backup. So we can delete the door backup. I don't know why they had door backups. Is there any more backups in here? Rear windows, no. Oh yeah, rear windows is a blank file. That's strange. Okay, so we don't need rear windows either. Delete the rear windows. Seat top. Okay, so that actually has something to do. So that's good. It just has a modifier. Modifiers, we'll talk a little bit about certain things you can do with modifiers. In this case, I'm just going to get rid of it because I can tell you that it was not turned on for anything. But yeah, we'll talk about those in later episodes for sure. But yeah, there we go. So that's how we separate our model quick and dirty from interior to exterior. And it's always nice to have two masters here. Okay? And then finally, let's talk about exporting our Blender to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2. I guess we're not there yet to export. So specifically, let's talk about that, okay? So if you click on anything in the scene and you go to materials here, and this whole thing has a mess of materials that we'll start separating in later episodes. But specifically, there's this material, under the material properties, there's this subsection called Microsoft Flight Simulator Material Params, and this is what we're going to be using for everything when we start building our materials up from scratch. We're going to be talking about windshields, we're going to be talking about glass, standard, which you use for pretty much everything, and then decals, which are pretty important as well. Geodecal frost even, where we start going into icing, when icing shows up on the aircraft. And then there's a couple other good stuff in here. So we'll be talking about a lot of those, diving deeper when we get into texturing on this thing. And for now, let's move on from that, okay? So the biggest things that you can do with Microsoft Flight Simulator is the material params. That's the biggest thing that if I could beat something into your head today, is that you need to start using these material params for everything. Don't use the materials just built into Blender, because these materials aren't going to work and they're not going to look good, and you're not going to get the results you want without using these material modes. Okay, so we're going to start using material modes in the future. Get that in your head now, start preparing yourself, and then let's talk about the export methods. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is go to File, Export, Extended GLTF 2.0 for Microsoft Flight Simulator. And before we even start going anywhere, what we're going to want to do is find that folder. Okay, so in episode 1 in the Microsoft Dev series, we made our simple aircraft project. We went to package sources, sim objects, airplanes, Jonx's simple default, into our model folder, and we made those two GLTFs that we're going to be overriding. Remember, we have an interior and an exterior. So the first one we're going to want to do is export to let's do our exterior first, okay? So let's go back. So I screwed that up. What we're going to want to do is just hide the interior, okay? So now we have the exterior active. And go ahead and just click on the exterior, right click and do select object, so it selects everything in the exterior. Go to File, Export again. Let's go find that folder again. I should have done that first. Okay, and then go to our exterior, which is the first one we're doing. So what I like to do here, and I'm going to be talking about this later on here, is I like to create a texture folder, okay? So this is inside your model folder, you're going to have a texture folder. And the reason why I do this is because if we go back one, you actually have your texture.base folder. You can write your materials directly to that folder, but there are certain checks you want to be doing with your textures to make sure that it doesn't crash your project. And I never like touching my good textures. I like writing them into my own folder where I can pick and choose what needs to be updated. Okay, so what I do is I just type textures in here, and that's going to drop a new textures folder in here when you export. That won't be built into the game. It will just be there for you to look at and to drag manually into your new textures folder. You can also put a copyright in there if you want to put your name or something. And then this is the big one right here. Remember export settings. You want to check that because you don't want to have to do this every time you go to export something. Remember it now so that you don't have to keep doing all this. You can just, next time you do it, you can just click that and hit export. You don't have to do all this stuff. Then click on Microsoft Flight Simulator. We don't have to worry about exporting LODs yet, and we don't have to worry about generating our XML file because I have this all set up in the template we're using from episode 1. We're going to include selected objects. So that's the important one right here because we selected everything in the exterior. So selected objects. You can also do visible. So, instead of selecting it all, I just hit everything in the interior. So I could have just done it by visible. You can also do it by renderable objects, which I never touch, and then you could also do it just by active collections. As you can see, we only have one active collection, so I could have done it that way too. So there's a bunch of options. I just like doing selected objects because I like having finite control over what I do. So I do that one because sometimes I want to export something without doors or something so that I can look how it looks like in the sim. And I don't have to worry about it. So I do finite control, so I do selected objects, to each your own. Next thing you want to do is make sure that its plus Y is up. And like I said, it's talking about here when you're at the top-down view that plus Y is up, which it is. And negative Y is down. So you just want to leave that checked. Don't mess with that. Next, we're going to talk about geometry. You want to get rid of this vertex colors. Never have that applied. Never have vertex colors applied. I think it's on by default. It can ruin your projects, okay? You're going to have a bunch of material issues when you start getting into texturing. Don't have that applied, okay? You can apply modifiers. That's not going to damage anything. You want to do UVs. You want normals. Don't worry about tangents or vertex colors. You can do tangents if you know what you're talking about. That's more expert level Blender stuff. But then you want to export the materials. That's what we're talking about here, having a texture folder with materials, okay? But yeah, I'd never do vertex colors. Next, we're going to be talking about animation. You can use the current frame. It doesn't matter in this case because we don't have any animations yet, but this is for the future. You could just export a current frame so that you don't have to export all the animations and save you time. I never do that. I just export all the animations, so I never worry about that tab either. And then extensions doesn't have anything, and it's just saying that this is an extensions enabled for the SOA sections, which you want checked. So make sure that's checked. After that, go ahead and click your exterior. Make sure, like I said, that you remember these export settings, and then hit export. Okay. And now it's just exporting it over that GLTF that we set up in episode 1. And let that finish. Okay, now that that finished exporting, what we're going to want to do is just do the opposite, okay? So now we're going to do the interior. I'm going to select everything in the interior master. File, export, extended. It saved our settings once again, so I'm going to click on the interior. As you can see here, it actually made a texture folder from the export of the exterior. So now we're going to do the interior, and it should have saved everything we did, so I don't have to worry about it. And I'm just going to hit export, okay? And something of note while it's sitting here exporting, remember that if your positioning's not right for your aircraft and you've already moved it into collections, you need to select all your collections if you want to move it or scale it or do anything of that nature, because once these are exported specifically, they're exported to their position. So let's say you accidentally just move your entire exterior down more. Well, your interior is going to be in the back end of the plane now instead of where it should be. So make sure if you have to move or scale or do any of that stuff, make sure that you're selecting all your collections. So collections might not be for you, collections might be for you. I like it because I can just turn things on and off and see everything if I want to drag it all. If they were in separate files, it's even harder to do that because then you're going to have to copy certain pieces into other files to get them lined up. So I like having it all in one file. So now that that's exported, We now completed phase number 1. Blender. Okay, we have exported our model. Congratulations. So now let's talk about some project checks. So we're going to be talking about the model CFG, the model XMLs, and the aircraft CFG. Now these were pretty much all covered in episode 1, but we're going to take a look at them one more time here. So let's go to our dev series folder, to our simple aircraft project, all the way into our project sources, sim objects, airplanes, and we go into our model folder. So the first one, like I said, you're going to check out your model CFG. And let's go ahead and edit that with Notepad+. And in here, we want to make sure we set this all up right, which we should have in the last episode. So we just want to have if true, so we want to have the first one is set as true, the second one set as true, the third one set as true, and the fourth one set as true, okay? And then these, like I said, go ahead and read these. They're pretty self-explanatory. It's basically saying if true and showing the exterior, also show the interior. Obviously, you want that true, because if not, you're just going to show the exterior of the aircraft without showing the interior 3D model at the same time. Anyways, the big key point here, which was talked about in episode 1, is having our proper names. So make sure that simple exterior XML, which we have, and simple interior XML, which we have. Make sure those names match. Okay, if they match, you're good to go. Next, you're going to want to open up your XMLs, and you want to make sure that your LOD, the simple interior LOD 00, matches what you just exported, which it does. Okay, now make sure it matches. If you exported it to something else, don't click on it and try to rename this to be like, crap, this was supposed to be interior, not just INT. If you rename it like that, it's not going to work. You're going to have to re-export it from Blender, okay? So make sure that you get it named right when you go to the file export here in Blender. Make sure it's named right just from there, okay? Because it's actually written into these files specifically. The names, they're hard-coded, and you can't be messing with them. So make sure that matches on the interior file, which it does. Okay, and then let's make sure that the exterior XML also matches. Simple exterior LOD 00, which it does. It matches that. Both the GIN and GLTF are named the same. So we're good to go. So we just passed those 2 checks. Then let's look at our aircraft CFG folder. Now once again, this was something we talked about in the first episode. So let's go back up one. Open our aircraft CFG in Notepad. And we should see specifically, go down till you see Flight Sim 00. This is what's defining your actual aircraft. And we need to define our model, panel, sound, and texture folders. Make sure they're accurate. So anything that's named the same, so if there's a model folder called model, it's just 2 quotation marks, okay? So your model folder is called model. Our panel folder is called panel. Our sound folder is called sound. Our texture folder is not, right? Because we did this in the last episode, we named it texture.base. So everything after the dot needs to go between the quotations. So this is really handy if you have a model.floats and you want a float model, specifically just for floats. You know, you could have a model.floats folder. So this is where we start getting into this. We'll get into it later in the series, but you're starting to get the idea of what this aircraft CFG does. It defines your liveries and submodels, and you start doing, you can start doing that stuff for extra additions to your aircraft when you get to that point. So yeah, everything's set up in here. It was good to go. But these are checks you want to do before your first time doing this, because if you didn't do these checks and let's say you had something named wrong between your aircraft and your model folders, your builder is going to crash and you're not going to be able to bring your thing in the game, and you're going to wonder, why is my model not coming in the game? Well, make sure your naming is correct. That's the biggest thing, okay? Next, you want to talk about your texture to texture, and this is what I was talking about. I don't like having the Blender drop everything into my official texture folder, because if I do, let me delete that, we're not going to need that anymore. If I do, then you're going to have some issues. You need to check things, okay? And a lot of people will just like take their entire texture folder, say it's good to go, and just, you know, cut them and paste it into your base. Well, that does work, especially if you made the textures. But if you didn't make these textures, you need to check a lot of stuff on them, because as you can see, I can see this one. It's long. It looks like a phone, right? It doesn't look like a square. You got to check something, and this is why it's very important, and I put this in the PowerPoint. Make sure your textures are divisible by 4, okay? Everything has to be divisible by 4 or it will crash the game. This is why a lot of aircraft developers will use 2048 by 2048 or 4096 by 4096 textures, 4K or even 8K, 8096 by 8096. Make sure they're divisible by 4. So what you want to do here is I want to go through each one, like 5000 by 3750. This sucks. This is why I don't like buying aircraft, and I like doing this myself to begin with. So what was that? 5000 by 3750 divided by 4. You got to check each number. We're good. 3750 divided by 4. We're not good. Look, it didn't round up. We got a 937.5. Okay? This will crash the game. Everything has to be divisible by 4. So right now, I have to delete these out of my texture folder. They're going to crash the game. We're going to have to probably have to redo these textures and UV maps just to get it working. So that everything that's 3750 has to be redone. There we go. We got 1024 by 1024. That will work. That will work. 1556 by 962. I'm not sure about that one. Maybe there's a bunch of math wizards watching this and you guys can do this in a quickie. But I can't. I'm a slow guy. Okay, that one's good. And 962. Not good. Okay, this texture's gone. That one's good. That one's good. 512 by 512 is good. Good, good, good. That's another 5,000er. She's not good. Whew. I don't know if those are good either. I keep closing calculator on accident. $61.60. Okay, that's good. By 43.20. Okay, that one's actually good. Okay, these are good. You can kind of tell, based on the square of them. Sometimes you'll have a random one that's like 515 by 512, and it will crash your whole game. So make sure you guys are checking all your textures, and this is why I'm just not writing it directly from Blender into here, because it will crash it. 256 by 512, they're both divisible by 4. So this one that I thought was weird is actually good. It was those other ones that luckily we checked. Okay, and I'm not even quite sure what these textures are doing. I haven't even looked at the texture files. We'll just see what they look like in game, just to start out with. But yeah, so we just did that check. Let's go back to our PowerPoint here. And then what you're going to want to do is do a pre-build check. Okay, pre-build check. Now I always do this at least once before I open the game, especially after I've done a bunch of texture work or I've done a bunch of things. We want to do a manual pre-build. So inside of our aircraft folder, next to our simple aircraft project XML, next to our package sources folder, you're going to want to drop a tool. Okay, and I already told you this in episode 1. You guys need to download the SDK. You need the SDK. You can't build projects without the SDK. Okay, so once you have the SDK, it installs in this SDK folder on your C drive. Inside there, you're going to have a tools folder. Inside the tools, you're going to have a bin folder. Inside the bin, you're going to have this thing called fspackageTool.x. Okay, what you're going to want to do is copy that, go to your folder that has your simple aircraft project, and you can paste a shortcut here. And there you go. This is a manual build tool. So this is actually what the simulator is calling to build your project, but now that you have the .exe in your folder, you can build it manually without even opening up Microsoft Flight Simulator. You don't even have to open the game. All you got to do is take the one next to your package sources, this master XML, drag it over the top, and then let go. Okay? and this is called a pre-build check. This is what I like to do before I open the game up. This is what I like to do when I've messed with a bunch of files, or I've done new textures, or basically I've done a bunch of stuff. Even if I'm just like right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the game. While the game's opening up, I can sit here and I can build my project for the first time. It's a little slower. Actually, it's a lot slower than doing it in game. But what I like about it is it actually shows more warnings and information. If something does go wrong, it will straight up tell you, hey, this texture file is not exporting correctly. And you'll be like, well, why is it? And then you'll look at it, oh, because it was 515 by 512. So it will tell you inside this tool what if you've encountered anything wrong, which is what I really enjoy it for. But also because I like to just build it as I'm opening up the game. That's a big plus, right? That way you don't have to wait till the game's loaded, because this game take ages to load, am I right? So might as well build while you load. So let me go ahead and close calculator here. Now that we have this all separated, by the way, you know what it's time for? We're going to save as version 2. Okay, we did our first version. And we're going to save that, and we can go ahead and close out of that, because we're getting the first one in the game. And then let's go ahead and go to our Blender file and drop version 1 into the old folder. We got our first old one, so now we're knowing we're working with version 2. And this thing is still kicking. And did the game start opening up yet? Maybe I didn't open it up. Thought I did. Go ahead and close out of this. And we can actually close out of this documentation. Okay, I'm going to let the game open up, and I'm going to pause it, and I'll be back when the game's open up. Okay, while I was paused, this toolkit actually finished building. So as you can see here, you're always going to have this failed to spawn lister for asset groups, specific ones, but those aren't too big of an issue, okay? And specifically, this is just talking about how in my visual effects, my package sources, my visual effects library, it's blank because I've left these like I explained in episode 1, so you're just having a failure for that. But what you're looking at specifically is to make sure that it builds the assets for your simple aircraft package, okay? And the best way to check that is now if you go next to your package sources, you have a package folder. And if you go into your package folder, as you can see here, we're actually having an issue. It didn't build our sim objects folder. Okay, so in our sim object, all we have is content info. So we actually did have a failure here. So what it's talking about is our project sources, visual effects, libs does not exist. Look at that, because it's visual effect.libs, we have visual effects. Okay, so I need to update this on flightsim.tl. I'm pretty sure everyone's probably experiencing this issue. Okay, so make sure you rename that. Now we can rebuild it again. But this time, Flight Simulator is probably up and not running, so. I had a crash early in the day, and it does this stupid thing where it lingers in Task Manager. So let's go ahead and try building it manually again now that that's fixed. And I will pause it and be right back. Okay, so while it was paused, so this is what I was saying. So as it builds, if you get past the generate your asset groups, as you can see it built all my asset groups, you'll start jumping into texturing, and it's going to start converting all your bitmaps into textures, okay? When you get to this portion, this is when you know that things are going right. And what I really like about this manual builder, if you've never looked at it, it will tell you specifically everything that's wrong with certain things, okay? So it's saying that the model texture was not found, all these model textures. Yeah, it's because we deleted them. Remember, they were horrible. And they would have crashed the game. So we had to delete those, so it's saying that those are not in the project anymore. And they'll just show up as pink or white in the game for now until we actually get those textures reassigned. There's some metallic texture roughness errors. You don't really have to worry about those. Start worrying about these. So the right door has a negative scale, ignoring the negative sign. And the door handle has a negative scale. Negative scale will look really freaking weird in the game, okay? So while we have this up and while we have the ability to look at this, let's go ahead and jump back into our Blender. And let's find these nodes it's talking about. Okay, so it's specifically talking about right door and door handle. They both have negative scales. So let's go ahead and go to our interior. I'm pretty sure this is where the door is. And we have our right door. And as you can see here, it has a negative scale. If you look at the X, Y, Z, it has a negative scale. And this is probably because it's been mirrored. And if you mirror something, it usually has a negative scale. So it's actually probably going to look funky in the game, okay? But to fix that, all we have to do is Control A and click on Scale. Okay, and it says cannot apply a multi-user object, okay? So there's other stuff here. It looks like our door handle, so our glass, we need to apply scale. Let's see here. Multi-user object glass aborting. I've never seen that before. Strange. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete that right door. And I'm going to duplicate the entire left door. Before I do that, let me get my cursor to world origin. Okay, you're going to see me actually duplicate this, okay? Or I could do mirror. Mirror's even better. So I'm going to show you modifier. So I'm going to click on left door, I'm going to go to modifier, and I'm going to click on mirror. And as you can see, it mirrors it right next to it, but we want to mirror on the origin. So we can click on something that's on the world origin. So what we're going to do is we actually moved our cursor to world origin, right? So we can go up here to, or down here to add, empty, plain access. And now when we click back on that left door, we can just click our empty that we just made as the center. Okay, so now it's mirroring it directly on this side of the aircraft. So that's what we're going to do for both of these. I don't know why it was doing that. I've never seen that error before. It's kind of very strange. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of these mirrored objects. Okay, so now they're all on that side now. And what you're going to want to do here is just click on these modifiers and then click on this down arrow and hit apply. And that just applies them as their own mesh. And then if you click on these again, as you can see here, they're now two doors together. But what we want to do is separate them. So you can just go to object mode to edit mode. Go ahead and click this X-ray mode so you can see everything and select everything, and we can just select that entire door, right click, separate selection, go back over to object mode. We can do that with the door handles again, edit mode, right click, separate selection, object mode, glass, edit mode, select it, right click, separate selection, object mode. Okay, so now we have everything separated back into the way it was before we had that weird issue. And everything's positive scale, okay? And like I was saying, if something was negative scale, you could have just clicked on the door, hit Control A, and hit scale. And see, it works here. It applied the scale, and it turned everything to 1.0, okay? So this is something good. Like if you get your aircraft scaled down to its appropriate size, that would actually scale your entire scene back to 1.0. So you know you're working with 1.0 scale on everything, okay? But we'll go ahead and skip that for now, and we'll save that for model cleanup in the next episode. But yeah, now that we've isolated both those issues that was talking about, the door handle and the right door, they're fixed. So the next time we export this, these will be fixed. So let me go ahead and save that again as version 2. We're going to hit a key to continue. And let's get back into it now that we went on a little detour, okay? So we're going to be talking about, we just did the project checks, we're going to be talking about the Microsoft Flight Simulator export, specifically building our project, the in-game aircraft editor, and then all this other stuff. Okay, so now that we're in-game, if you don't know, didn't watch episode 1, we have a dev mode, okay? And now what we need to do is go dev mode, open project. We need to go find that simple aircraft project and double click on the XML. Now it does take a second to load. You're going to realize real fast developing for this game that you're going to have a lot of waiting time between opening up the game and loading projects and building projects. You're going to have a lot of time, so it's real nice to have your Blender open at the same time. You can do some things while you're building, while you're opening. Anyways, so once you have it built, usually your inspector is sitting on the side like this, and this is sitting right here. What I like to do at this point is, just like episode 1, we set all this stuff up, make sure it's all set up, and then we already built our package manually with that pre-build check, okay? But you never know what these updates are hiding, especially with SU7 and stuff. If you don't trust that manual build, just go ahead and hit this blue, your aircraft right here, and just hit build package one more time. And it will do the rebuild process, and the one in-game is much faster than the pre-build check. You're probably going to see this thing be done in quite, a short time here, probably a minute or 2. I'm not even going to pause the video because it will probably be done here soon. Okay, and there you go. So that only took I'd say a minute and a half. And a lot of it's because we already have our project built. But it's always safe to rebuild your project, especially if you're working with a brand new update. So next thing you can do, you can actually close out of these. You don't need those anymore. And we can go look at our aircraft in the hangar. So believe it or not, we can go to Profile. We can go to Hangar. You go to Change Aircraft. And you should see our aircraft. You're going to see it because I have this default template for you right here. CG Trader Simple. And if we click on this, we hit back. There you go. We got our aircraft model in the game. And it looks like those textures that we're having issues that we had to delete were actually exterior issues, which is quite sad that we're not going to have those to work with to begin with. But there you go. So our aircraft is in the game, and it's not contact point right, because as you can see, it's sunk into the ground. So there's going to be some fixing we got to do. And like I said, see how they had negative scale before we did the fix? Now you can see the doorknob is clear outside of the aircraft, and this door is all screwed up and it's like inside cutting off the chair. And the reason for that is Microsoft Flight Simulator does not delineate negative scale. So if you have any negative scaling in your scene, it's going to be all screwed up. And a lot of people think that that has to do with like bone animation and stuff. Well, it kind of does. Your bones have to be centered to world origin, and they have to be applied scale so that they don't get screwed up either. And we'll be talking about bone animations way down the line in the future, when we start talking about some extra little features we can do with bones, maybe like some wing flex. We'll try something like that. But yeah, so your aircraft's finally in the game, so let's go to the next bullet point, which is the in-game aircraft editor and contact points. In order to get there, you have to get your aircraft on the flight line, okay? So let's go back in. I know it's sunk in the ground. We're going to make it look better here, trust me. And we'll go ahead and select your favorite runway. And go ahead and, before I load in the game, I'm actually going to change my options. It's always smart when you're doing development just to go down when you're not trying to do previews to like the lowest end graphics, so that everything loads faster when you're doing this, because especially with development, sometimes you don't know your poly count right away, and it will be killing your GPU until you do optimization to fix it. So I just always just go to low end when I'm developing, and then to see rain effects you have to be in at least medium. Same with weather effects like icing and stuff. So if you don't see rain on your windshield, it's probably because you're on low end still. Make sure you change that, and if you still don't see it, then you know you have something wrong. Okay, so look at this. We already got a nice cockpit view. That's hilarious. Okay, but let's go ahead and go to exterior view, just so you can see this thing, that it's on the flight line. It's all screwed up. And then I also don't want this sound interrupting my video, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my sound. At least turn it down. Okay, and so what we're talking about here is the in-game editor and contact points. So what we're specifically talking about here is, if we go to tools, there's a thing called aircraft editor, and if you pop this up, it has a bunch of stuff. There's a general tab, a weight and balances tab, contacts, fuel, geometry, aerodynamics, everything. Okay, we're going to deep dive into this next episode, but this one specifically, we're going to talk specifically about the general and some contact points to make sure our aircraft's off the ground. Okay, so general, what you're going to want to do is ensure your type and model is correct. These are stuff that we edited manually, like I said in episode 1. And remember, I was saying that we mentioned we're going to go look this stuff over in the aircraft editor, which we are right now. So next, you want to look at your pilot info. Make sure that you have your pilot info set up correctly. And this is all stuff that you should have: pilot male casual, or you could have pilot female casual. You could also have whatever character you want in here, and it will have those as your default characters. And then the idle one post propeller, which is your default animation for those pilots. And we'll start talking about those pilot nodes later on in the series, but you just want to make sure those are right. Key chain nodes, these are what your hands follow. So you can see it with the new F-18. Their hands follow the yoke, or their feet are on the rudder pedals and they follow the rudder pedals. We're going to talk a little bit in the future about how to do IK chains with your hands following things, and that also applies with like VR. We'll start talking about VR motion controllers with these. And then services available, you can just click it and it will highlight. So let's say I want to have a fuel truck available for this aircraft, a small pushback available, a marshaller available, so that's how you do it. So this one specifically, let's just do a fuel truck, small pushback, and a marshaller. And then these are variants. So if you wanted to add a new, or not variant, liveries, okay? So we have our default livery. Now let's say I wanted to make a new livery. We can make it directly in here manually and add everything. I don't like doing that. I like making it outside the game and then having it populate in here. It's much more easier to make liveries manually, actually. And by what I'm saying there is, if we go into our, I'm all over the place. If we go into our dev series, package sources, sim objects, airplanes, you can see we already have a texture livery name because I have this set up in the template for you to have a second livery. All we'd have to do for that, and manually it's much easier to do it, is you can just create a second flight sim. And I think I covered the second flight sim in episode 1. If not, we'll be getting down to that later when we have a second livery. But yeah, that's what that's for, and I think it's much easier to do it manually than having to do it in this system. So if we look at global, just make sure that your title is good, default. And like I said, it's the same as editing the actual file in text editor. We're just looking through it, and there's a little bit more stuff. You can like hover over things and it will tell you certain stuff that it does. But this is the same thing as text editing, this whole section. So I recommend doing text editing for this, and just do text editing for the general tab. There's a few things that are easier to figure out, but even like field truck, small pushback in marshaller, like if I opened up my aircraft CFG, it will say services available, and I could just put pushback from 0 to 1, marshaller from 0 to 1. You get the picture. So it's really easy to edit this aircraft CFG manually versus doing it in the game. So I recommend just doing it manually. So the one we're really going to focus on is our contacts and brakes, okay? So specifically contact points. Now you can create a new contact point down here, and if you create a new contact point, you have multiple options. You can have a wheel, a scrape point, a skid, a float, a water rudder, a ski, a propeller. And a contact point is just a point on the aircraft where it touches something else. So the best way to think about it is your model is just a 3D model, but it doesn't have collision points. So you're going to be wrapping your 3D model in these collision points so that the sim knows how to read it. As you can see, so I have some collision points that are on the ground right now, so my wheels are in the ground, okay? So what I'm going to do here, let me delete that one I just made, is I'm going to go to collision point 0, and I'm going to drag this to the side here to a second screen that I can see. Actually, I'll just make this smaller, because I need to make sure you guys can see this for the... There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that a little bit better. Oh my gosh, PowerPoint. Okay, so what I'm going to do up here is I'm going to go to camera, and I'm going to click on developer camera. Developer camera, you can use W, A, S, and D to move around, and then you can use your numpad numbers to rotate, 5 and 6 and 4. You can use all that to rotate. And what's nice about developer camera is you can get nice and close in here. You can clip inside. You can resync as many times as you want, and your camera's not going to be jumping around and resetting. So I just get to a point where I can see real good what I'm doing. And contact point 0, I can hit this gizmo, and we can see now that contact point 0, which is supposed to be a wheel contact point, is like on the belly of the aircraft. Well, we don't want that, so we're going to drag that down somewhere where the wheel is. And this is why this contact point thing is like a finicky process. You have to kind of drag things where they are, and sometimes you can't see it because it's in the ground. So what I like to do here is I'll just go to contact point 0 where I dragged this down, and I'll take this X, Y, and Z, right? So the long, the lat, and the vert. So vert is up and down, long is nose to tail, and lateral is wing to wing. So I know that I'm negative 7.65 vertically with this point. So I'm just going to copy this vertical point, and I'm going to go to my other wheel points, and I'm going to paste that in here. And we probably only have 3 wheels. Yep, only 3 wheel points. And then I'm going to do File, Save, and Resync. And what that's doing is it's saving your aircraft CFGs. Well, I say aircraft CFGs. It's saving in your CFGs. Specifically right now, it's saving in the flight model CFG. Because in the flight model CFG, we talk about specific contact points. And this is what we're modifying right now. So as you can see, this is real hard to do manual. You're going to have to do a bunch of math and stuff to line everything up. I don't like doing that. This is why I use the in-game editor for contact points and geometry. It's so much easier. So while that's loading, let's go ahead and talk about what just happened. So save and resync. A save and resync will take everything that you're modifying in the game right now in your package sources folder. It will save them in your package sources folder, and then it will recopy those and rebuild just those files into your packages folder, which is your temporary project. This is what you're using in the game. Your package folder is, in layman's terms, what the game is reading and playing, while your package source folder is what the game is building and importing. So think of your package source folder right now as just the master file. I can delete anything from this and it doesn't matter. Now, because the game's reading my packages folder, I can't really delete things in there without screwing up the game and probably crashing it. So it's pulling from the package sources, it's building it, and building a package folder. Okay. So we just had a save and resync, and as you can see here, we're getting places. Okay. So I did pretty good actually as far as the where the tires need to go. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to go back to contact point 0. We're going to go to Gizmo and we're going to drag that right under the tire and slide it right on the tire there. There we go, and you can kind of go around to look there, make sure it's looking nice. And then you can actually probably just copy that depth or z-axis and put them in there. And once again, go to contact point 1, turn on the gizmo. It looks like we're almost close there. We got to line up our tire this way. There we go. And then let's line up our tire this way. Now that we have that tire lined up, all we have to do is copy everything. So let's copy 8 into there, 8 into there, 4 into there. Now when you're doing the opposite side, you're just going to want to delete the negative here. And then copy the depth. And then if I turn on that gizmo, as you can see, it dropped it because I just copy and pasted points, but mirrored the X value by taking the negative off. And then it just mirrored it at the exact same as the other one. So we didn't even have to like manually move that one. I just used numbers, and I basically just converted it over to the next contact point by just removing a negative sign on the X value. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and save and resync. So we're going to be talking about these other contact points, propeller and scrape points, in the next episode, where we're going to go in depth with this aircraft editor. But let me just file, save, and resync so I can show you here that the aircraft will be now sitting on the ground. And let me talk about one more thing here before we get into the next part. So build limitations, okay? So a lot of people think that, let's say right now, and let's do this because I want to demonstrate this to show you that this is not an issue. If I open up my Blender file, we fixed the door. If you remember, we fixed the door on that thing, okay? We fixed the X value, or not the X value, the scaling that was having the issue. Okay, so even though we have the game open right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to go up here. We're going to go ahead and export. Let me drop that, get rid of that empty. We don't need that anymore. I'm going to go ahead and just select my entire interior because that's the one that had the door issue. The interior has the doors. So I'm going to select my interior, export, and then we're going to go find the package sources folder and export over the interior. And this is why it's really, because we already know there's flawed textures in here, this is why it's safe to not put it directly into your Blender texture folder. I mean, your package sources texture folder. You want to have that subfolder between the two that you can manually move stuff. So now I don't have to worry about it. I know it's dropping all these textures into the model folder, into my package sources. it's dropping everything into this model folder, this texture folder that doesn't matter, and I don't care about it. I'm just going to let it drop into there, and I'm not going to even try to do some kind of transfer because I already got the textures that work that I need. Okay, so there you go. It exported the changes. And so what you can do here, now that you're in game, and people think that you have to like quit the game to rebuild. You don't. I could be sitting here on the flight line, just go to Tools, Project Editor, it pops back up. I can click on my aircraft, and I can bring up my inspector, and I can hit Build Package, okay? And it will build the package. It will take about a minute, 2 minutes, like I said. I'm probably going to pause it right now, just because I don't want to waste video time, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about here in a second. Okay, and now the package has stopped building, you'll see, because this console popped up. And now the aircraft, if I can get rid of these two, it resynced, so now my wheels are fairly close to the ground. I can still do some fine tuning. I'm going to save that for the next episode so we can move the aircraft up to where it needs to be. But if you look here, my door's fixed, okay? So you can export your Blender, you can change textures, you can change anything in your package sources folder, and you don't have to leave the game, guys. You can just hit Project Editor and you can build the package again, okay? Now this won't work sometimes when a brand new update's come out and it's screwed up the project builder, but for the most part, when you get to a stable release, like SU7's finally a little bit stable now, it's still horrible, but it's still stable. You can build and you don't have to worry about closing the game or doing any manual building. You can just hit build, okay? So that is pretty much the explanation of the building limitations here. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about is thumbnails. But before we get to the thumbnail, let me go ahead and finally close out of PowerPoint. I've hated that this thing's been open so long. And let's close out of the aircraft editor. And if you look here, we finally have somewhat of an aircraft, okay? So we just imported our aircraft all the way from Blender. And let me turn on sounds here so you can hear it in game. There you go, you can probably hear that in game. But we finally have an aircraft on the flight line. And let me get rid of my developer camera. And you can see it's kind of having a shake because you have engine going. This is why I said in episode 1 it was important to have a sound file attached even if you don't have sounds for it yet. Because it's going to help you determine if the aircraft's actually running because we don't have propeller animations yet or anything. Okay? So, as you can see here, I can turn off the parking brake. And we can basically fly this like the profile we loaded, which I think was the Cessna 152 from last episode. So we can actually take off now, and this thing will fly like a Cessna 152. Okay? Which is fairly cool. And hopefully that kind of explains why it's so important to have some kind of template you're basing your aircraft off of. To begin with, but I mean, there you go. So we have an aircraft in the game, and as you can see there, you saw a little bit of the sparks. I can actually go on the dirt here, and you're going to see dirt effects. See the dirt effects coming out? And that is because we have it already set up with the template that I already put out for you guys. Please use my template. It already has all this stuff built into it. It's so smart and so easy. And because it's connecting already automatically to those contact points that we have set up, okay? So how easy was that? We already got ground effects. We got effects, okay? It's really nice. But yeah, we finally got our aircraft, this little aircraft in the game, and it's flying. You know, it's not flying like it should be. It's flying like a Cessna 152, but that's better than nothing. We got somewhere to start, okay? So let's go back, go to the main menu, now that we have our aircraft in game. And the last thing I'm going to be talking about today before I let you guys go, and once again, I'm sorry these videos are so long. I'm just really trying to explain everything, and I know I've missed so much in here. It's so hard to talk at a level of people who are building this for the first time, especially when someone like me, I've been touching this for a whole year now, day after day. I find myself not thinking about explaining it as if it's your first time hearing it. So if you have a question, or if I missed something, or if you're like, hey, you did that so fast, like, what are you talking about? What does this mean? Go ahead and drop a comment in YouTube. Join my Discord group. Ask questions to the community like I mentioned in video 1. We're going to help you guys out. I know that some of this nomenclature and some of the things I say are so fast, and sometimes I breeze past them. I apologize for that. I just don't realize that I'm doing that at the time that I'm making these videos, because like I said, I've been doing these so long, it's kind of hard for me to teach at that beginner level. So yeah, the next thing we're going to do, let's go into our last thing. So project editor, we can click on our project, make sure we have inspector open up, and we're going to want to capture a thumbnail finally so we can get rid of this ugly thing. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we can go to our hanger. So as you can see, nothing pops up here. It says capture aircraft thumbnail. You need to navigate to the hanger. Okay, so let me just drag this off the screen for a second. Let's go to our profile. Let's go to our hanger. Here's our aircraft. Unfortunately, it's pretty ugly because we don't have textures on the exterior, which I'm very sad about, but we'll fix that soon. And then let's go ahead now. If we bring this back, you can now see that we have a capture aircraft thumbnail open. So we can do that. We can hit capture aircraft thumbnail. And I usually just select the same folder that my simple aircraft project is in with the package sources. And I'll hit select. And it will capture that thumbnail. And once that's captured, you can go open that up and it will be saved right next here to the package sources. So if you actually, it's loading right now, you can tell because it's 0 kilobytes. There you go, it populated. So you can open it up and you can look at it, and look at that ugly pink textured garbage, but we got a thumbnail. Okay, so what we want to do real quick is I'm just going to do this real fast. I recommend downloading GIMP or some kind of editing tool for pictures. Okay, and then if we go into package sources, sim objects, airplanes, all the way into our texture base folder where we're saving our base textures, you'll have these thumbnails. Okay, and I've already if you click on these, part of the template that I made, I've posted the official numbers in here so you know what you're doing. Okay, so the easiest way to do it is actually just open these up with GIMP as well. You don't have to open the small one up, just open the normal thumbnail up. And then, so you have that open. And then your aircraft, you're just going to select all. Control C, go into here. Zoom out by holding Control V. As you can see, it's freaking massive. So turn that into a new layer, and then we're just going to scale this down. So hold this, go to scale, click it, and then let's go by percent, and let's make this about 50%. Still so big, but you want it to match as close. As you can see here, we're getting to the closer to the edge. So you could actually just scale it this way and move it like that until you get this like semi-accurate, or you could even resize it. Okay, so this is one way you can do it. I don't like doing that way. A good way I do it is I'll just look at the requirements here. So it will be 618 by 582. So what I'll do here is I'll just go to image, scale image, and I'll go width by 1618, and it will automatically put it to 910, which is fine. So now we have the proper width, 1618, and we have to do it by 582. So I'll go to image, I'll go to canvas size, and I'll make sure it's not linked, and then I'll change it to 582, and then I'm just going to hit center, and we'll center it, and then I'll hit resize, and there you go. And you can adjust the thumbnail. It's going to adjust the thumbnail based on the aircraft. We'll talk about that in later episodes. I just wanted to tell you guys like how you can do it. And then we're going to export that as, go to our package sources, all the way into our model folder. I mean, not model, sorry. Our texture folder, texture base. And we're going to overwrite that thumbnail JPEG. Okay, and then you're going to want to look at the second size one. As you can see here, 600 by 216, and it should be pretty fixed here. So if we just go to image, scale image, 600 by 216, scale, file, export as, and we'll do that as the thumbnail small, replace. Okay, so you can quit that. That's how you guys can do a quick and dirty thumbnail, so it's not this in the game. And now if we just go back here, let's go ahead and rebuild our package, like I said, because we just changed a couple things in our package sources. You can just hit build package whenever you want. Like I said, start getting used to building your package and waiting. You'll be waiting quite a bit doing this hobby. Okay, and now that that's built, you'll see it's still like that. Well, that's because you just got to go back to the hangar, change your aircraft, and now you'll see that your thumbnail is loaded in game, and you can select it. And even if that's the large thumbnail that you did, and then if you went to the world, you'll see it in the corner. And it's not loading right, so just go off and then on it, and there you go. It just has to do a little quick refresh there. So sometimes you just got to click on and off of things and it will refresh. So that's a small thumbnail. So now we got our thumbnails, and we're good. So hopefully you guys learned a lot today. We kind of covered a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, even though it's been an hour and a half. So like I said, if you guys have any questions, or if I skimmed over something too fast, please ask the question and I'll be getting back to you in no time. Sorry this video took so long to get out there, mainly because I've been working on, of course, other projects, which I'm going to open one right now, that discus, so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I haven't had the time with my other projects to really knock these out more than once a week. And I know this one's kind of been over a week, and I apologize for that, but like I said, we're going to make sure that we stick with this and we get it through. And I'm really thankful that you guys are here to support me, and that you guys are watching this, and you guys are learning, and you guys are getting interested. And eventually you guys are going to realize, as you start getting maybe to episode 4 or 5 of this series, that you're going to get to the Discord and you're going to start asking questions, and you're going to surpass where the video series is. So sometimes it's going to take a week or 2 weeks to get the next video out. You'll probably be past that. And I apologize if you guys are already past this episode and you've already figured out how to get the model in the game. But if not, hopefully this video helps you. So what I want to show you right now, one last thing, like I said at the beginning of the video, the ad for that discus that's coming out. And I just want to give you guys a little preview look at it. So here is the discus, and we've been putting a lot of work into this model, and this aircraft is awesome. Okay, and I'm just going to show you just a quick glance at the exterior and the interior. Okay, and there is a lot of detail going into this thing. It's super fun, super high detailed, and once again, this thing's coming out for free on flightsim.to within the next couple weeks. So get excited, get ready. It's a great glider. A lot of work's been going into it. And yeah, I'm going to leave you guys at a high note with that. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time, where episode 3 we're going to be discussing the aircraft editor in depth, and maybe a couple other things with Blender that we need to fix here and there. But for the most part, it's going to be the aircraft editor, and we're going to be delving into each section of that aircraft editor, about wrapping the geometry, getting that shell wrapped around it, and some other things that are very important to figure out. And it's not going to fly like a Cessna 152 anymore by the time we're done with it. It's going to fly like the simple aircraft it is. Okay, so thank you guys for tuning in, and we're going to see you next time. Thank you.